Hey guys, and welcome back to the Science of Exercise. This series is called HOAX. So today we're going to be going over booty bands for glute hypertrophy on the HOAX series. James, what's your take on booty bands for hypertrophy HOAX?
So I'm going to go with hype, and we'll dive into why I think so after we kind of get your opinion, but I definitely think they should be hyped, especially for some specific uses. Now, I'm not saying everyone's perfect in what they're putting out there, but I am going to go with hype, especially from a concept standpoint.
A concept standpoint. All right, I'm gonna ask you to say the word hype one more time for me in relation to booty bands for glute hypertrophy.
I'm going to say hype. I'm going to say it. I'm going to put it out there.
All right. So I'm going to take the opposite. I'm going to take hoax, and I'll give my reasoning why, and then we'll have a solid discussion on our two standpoints, because I think I know where you're gonna take this, and I'm looking forward to that conversation. But the reason why I say hoax is because the booty band is typically used in abduction, or taking away from midline. So that would be your good girl, bad girl, but really it's the bad girl, right? The taking away, that machine that's used at the gym. It's also used sideline. You can do hip abductions as well there. The two muscles that come to mind, the main ones when we're talking about glute hypertrophy, that the booty bands are supposed to hit, which they do hit, glute minimus and glute medius. Those are used in hip abduction, and that's a primary role. They're used to stabilize the hip. So my main issue with glute hypertrophy, when we're talking about overall size, those two muscles are pretty small in the scheme of things, whereas glute maximus, which is mainly a hip extensor, is the overarching large muscle that plays the bigger role. No pun intended. It's literally the bigger muscle. So when we're talking about glute bands, hip extension is not a primary use for glute bands. So if we want to increase overall glute hypertrophy, we're looking at hip extension, or going into flexion and then coming out of extension. If you want to look at it that way, that's fine too. But it's essentially the squat, the deadlift, the hip thrust. We can get into a bunch of other exercises, but those are the big three that come to mind. I'd love to hear your approach on how we can say that the bands are a hype for glute hypertrophy as a whole.
Well, let me ask you this, right? So you just said that we were concerned about a stabilizer muscle and then looking at hypertrophy and how we can increase this. So,
sure.
I can use my calves to stand upright and I can do squats, but should I still do calf raises for such a small muscle?
I mean, yeah, but I don't think it's definitely not something that I personally put as a priority unless it's like a bodybuilder, right? So, just for context.
And I think just for context, that's usually that's most of the time, with the exception of some athletic warm-up. I think if we're looking at true glute hypertrophy, we're probably looking more at that physique athlete, right? Somebody who's very concerned about the shape of their body and not just its performance. And so,
Sure.
I think it's twofold, right? So I actually have some experience before they were called glute bands. The PT just used to take resistance tubing, tie it around your knees, and we did all the same exercises that are now you see all over the Instagram that make for some hot, steamy videos. It was all the same stuff. But, I think what it was, and for me, it was really looking at activation of those muscles and that proprioception, or just being aware that I had them and what they were doing. And so I think the burn itself, and this is just my opinion, while it does play a role, and you're looking at that high volume for some hypertrophy in the glute medius and the minimus, I think the biggest thing, though, is, like you said, it's a stabilizer. And when you become aware of it, what it's really going to do is it's going to allow you to increase the intensity of your compound lifts. So once you fully understand how to activate your glutes, and you can really move some serious weight or some high volume with your deadlifts, with your squats, with your hip thrust, I think you're actually going to get better quality movements, and overall, you're going to get more hypertrophy. So I think incorporating it, again, I don't think there's very high risk of damage, right? You're not going to get hurt using one of these booty bands, and I think it's only got upside. So I think it's definitely something that we should be hyping up.
Okay. So I agree with the utilization of it, but again, in the context of glute hypertrophy, I think these bands play very minimal role when it comes to a hypertrophic effect versus a stabilization or strengthening of those muscles, which could then help lead to a heavier squat, a heavier deadlift, and a safer one at that. But again, when we're talking about very specific, the actual hypertrophy of the glute itself as a whole, I think that it plays such a minimal role that I think it is overhyped in the context of making it look nice versus making it perform nice, if that makes any sense.
I think so. I think, yeah, if I'm hearing what you're saying, so if I look at the hot steamy videos on Instagram,
Sure.
Did they get that way just using a booty band?
Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely not. You are not going to get glutes that shape or that size just from some elastic band at home. Now, combined with other exercises, I think it definitely has some benefits. But if that's all you're using at home and you think you're going to look like the Instagram model, that's not true. That's not going to happen.
So I think that's the issue, right? And I think that's really what this hyper hoax is you're going to see that thing utilized in the sense of this is the end all be all, or at least it comes across that way online. It's this thing will make your glutes look like X, Y, and Z, which is the model that's using it. Pick your model, they're using it. That's not how, and that's not why their glutes look that way. It plays in my opinion, small piece of that pie. I'm talking like 10-15% tops, and I think that is really reaching. It's probably smaller than that. And that's my issue with the glute booty band in the scheme of aesthetics and appeal versus performance. That's where I think it's got its place.
I would agree. I think if we're saying from that standpoint, yes, if you just go home, think you're going to do some some monster walks or some clamshells, and then poof, it's gonna, double in size. That's a total hoax. It's not gonna do that. But do I think it's gonna make you a better quality lifter, which down the road can contribute to those gains?
100%.
But yeah,
100%.
If you're just doing clamshells and monster walks at home, that's not gonna get you there. That's not gonna get you the results you want.
Well, I'm glad that we kind of came to that middle point of like what we mean in the realm of hypertrophy, which sure you can get some hypertrophy. I mean that word means size, and can you get a little bit of size increase when you use something, specifically a muscle that we're referring to? Sure, you're going to get a size increase, but that size increase in comparison to glute max size increases is going to be minuscule and might be barely noticeable at the end of the day. That's my thought.
I would agree. So I think, final verdict, I will say I'm going to go with hoax if it's used in isolation. So if the only thing you're using is a booty band, I'm going to say it's a hoax. You're not going to end up like the Instagram model.
100% agreed. I'm just glad that we came full circle, because I know that was going to be a big conversation for us. And so at the end of the day, you're not going to get this beautiful peach that you're seeing on IG from just doing booty bands, but please use them because they are beneficial. All right, that's it. Boom.
Boom.